Alright, in this video we're talking about how to multiply and divide integers. So first we have 2 times -3, and I can think of that as two groups of -3. So if I want to use my number line, I could think about Cecil going backwards 3 two different times, so he would end up at -6. And you could also use the tiles if you want, so I could think of it as two groups of -3, so I have a group of -3 and another group of -3, and in total I would have 6 negatives. Alright, for the next one I have -1 times 4. And I can switch the order of those numbers if I want to make it easier. So I can think of this as 4 groups of -1. So again, with Cecil, he'd be going backwards -1 4 different times. So Cecil would go back 1, back 1, back 1, back 1, and he ends up at -4. Alright, same thing with the units, or with the positives and negatives. I can draw 4 groups of -1, and so in total, I would have 4 negatives again. Okay, so this one's -2 times -4, and this one's a little bit different, so I'm going to think about this. I'm going to ignore this negative out front real quick. So I have two groups of -4. So I have 4 negatives and then 4 negatives. But when I think about that negative, it's like saying I want the opposite of the two groups. And so the opposite of negative would be positive. So I'm going to make all these positive. And so then my answer would end up being +8 instead of -8. And if that doesn't 100% make sense, you can look up more explanations online, or maybe just trust me on this one. A negative times a negative is a positive, because you're kind of taking like the opposite of what we did, like in number 2 or number 1. So if I go back, I can see that a positive times a negative was a negative. And then for number 2, a negative times a positive was a negative. And for this one, a negative times a negative was a positive. And so there's that pattern we have. And the same thing is true for dividing. So if I had -6 divided by 2, that's like saying that I have 6 negatives, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I want to cut them into 2 groups. So I'll do a group here and a group here. And there's -3 in each of those groups. So my answer would be -3. So I can see that the same rules apply for multiplying that apply for division.